Joining me now, Dennis Shanahan, National Editor at The Australian. Dennis, great to have you, as always. Busy legislative agenda. We'll get to the voice in a moment. That referendum machinery bill still in the Parliament. Of course, we expect the actual legislation in relation to the question that will be put. My tip's October, but you'll tell me otherwise. Give us a sense, though, on the other legislation, the safeguard mechanism. The Greens are absolutely holding the government to ransom, aren't they?
Oh, yes, they are. And look, the safeguards mechanism is a key for the Albanese government. There's no doubt about that. It is the answer to their climate change solution. They want to have this through, and this is how they intend to do it. Now, Chris Bowen has actually made the point that if the Greens oppose this and they knock back the safeguards mechanism, will have the climate wars for another 10 years. This, of course, is harking back to the Greens' decision to oppose Kevin Rudd's pollution reduction scheme, carbon pollution reduction scheme in 2010. And so what Chris Bowen is doing is pushing the Greens to say, here is your chance to actually give a solution. Now, I think what's more likely to happen is that the Greens will demand some more changes. The government will probably give them some changes on transparency and so forth as far as the safeguard mechanism is concerned and as far as the emissions levels are concerned. But in the end, I think the government will actually get through much of its safeguards mechanism legislation. The Greens will claim a victory and the government will let them do that because, like some of the other claims the Greens have made about big victories, they've been hollow claims and the government has got largely what it wants.
Right, let's go to the voice. We've got the mechanical bill, if I can call that, in the Parliament. A committee report landed on that. It'll be debated by the Senate. We know the Liberal Party wants equality of funding and pamphlet information to voters. I think that will be fought out in the Senate. There is the other issue, though, the actual question we will all vote on. As I said, I think it's October. It's got to get in before the wet season, particularly in the NT. It will be a material issue up there trying to vote in the wet. So working around that, let's say it's October, it has to sit on the table for, I think it's 90 days under the rules of the Constitution before the question goes to the people. But we know there's been a brouhaha inside the government and the working party about the words, and it hinges on not just this being a voice to the Parliament, but including the executive. And the executive, of course, is the public service, it's the PM, it's the ministers, it's the other apparatus of our system. We know, Dennis, incredibly, that the Solicitor General has been brought into all of this. Tell us what's going on.
Well, I think that, of course, we've got two aspects, the machinery bill, and that will probably go through the Senate and the coalition will oppose it, but the government will get what it wants on machinery. But the big issue is the wording of the referendum that is to go to the people. This has now been closed down. The government is closing down debate on this. The working group, the Indigenous working group, came up with a form of words. Mark Dreyfus, the Attorney General, actually asked the working group on the basis of the Solicitor General's advice to change the wording to mitigate the impact on executive government. It is now about executive government, and that includes, hundreds of thousands of public servants, 189 departments and agencies, all who could be affected by the voice to the executive. That is, public servants having to provide and allow for advice from the voice before they make a decision. I mean, today, Anthony Albanese in the Parliament talked about maintaining the right of government to declare war. But if there is a voice to executive government, should he have to go to the voice to seek some sort of advice and consultation there? It's nonsense. And what is happening is that it is going to, could lead to the defeat of the referendum because so many people are concerned. So many supporters of the Yes campaign are dead against inclusion of executive government and that's what we have now. Cabinet's going to have to make a decision next week, and that will be a big point of difference between the Indigenous working group and the government.
Just quickly, Dennis, we already know there's a split in the Indigenous lobby. There's a split with people like Jacinta Price and others who are against it. Lydia Thorpe, who doesn't think it goes far enough. If the working group has wanted this and executive government component in there, and the government's not of a mind to do that, let's say they go forward and just keep it to the Parliament, what's that going to do to the lobby who've been fighting for months and months? What's going to happen with their public support for this referendum?
Well, that's the huge political problem the government faces, that if it insists on getting through a referendum which has a chance to pass, which does away or limits the impact on executive government, those groups who are demanding the executive government be included, and let's remember, it was the government that inserted executive government, not the Uluru Statement and not the other reports. So the government has a huge political problem here that if it puts through the wording of a referendum that may pass, it actually then faces being attacked from its own side, its own working group and its own activists and lobbyists saying it's not enough. This is a diabolical dilemma for Anthony Albanese, and if he doesn't change enough and quickly enough, then he should really consider putting off the referendum. Otherwise, it is going to go down and be a disaster for all concerned.
Tina Shanahan, thank you.